At the beginning of the 19th century, the village of Hollowglen is in a dark period of intense mysticism. Every year, its inhabitants gather on the last night of October before a bonfire and discard everything that is impure. This time, people are bringing rotten fruits and agricultural pests until two men arrive dragging a young mother with a baby. Crying, she pleads for her child to be spared despite his physical deformities, as he is just a newborn who has never harmed anyone. Insensitive to her pleas, the village councillor orders the immediate execution of the accused. After witnessing her son's terrible fate, the woman reveals herself to be the witch of Hollowglen and curses all the children of the village, prophesying that the curse will repeat every year on this very day. The councillor is the first to run away, holding her own baby, and soon everyone else follows suit. While the witch recites the spell, something begins to grow from her son's bones until it takes the form of a demon. The creature then frees itself from the flames and dons a black cloak to hunt its victims, starting with the illustrious councillor. Then we jump forward to over a century and a half later, where we meet Neil Perkins' family. Nikki is his teenage daughter, whose mother passed away a few years ago, Kate is his second wife, and the youngest is the baby Nathan. The family is traveling to Hollowglen to spend a few days in the village, and Nikki has also invited her best friend, Cammy. The reason for the trip is a business opportunity, and Neil is excited about the chance to get rich. Upon arriving in Hollowglen, they stop at a diner where Nikki and Cammy start laughing at the simple talk of the owner, a woman named B. After scolding the girls, Neil asks for directions to the house he rented on Willow Road. BEA's husband introduces himself as Sheriff Milgreen and explains how to get to the address. Then, Nathan causes a strange sensation while sitting in his mother's lap. As B admires the boy, the sheriff makes a comment about the age difference between the siblings. Always in a good mood, Neil responds that a new family is his second chance at happiness. At that moment, an elderly man named Charlie enters the diner. He becomes very nervous upon seeing the visitors and starts telling them to leave, talking about demons and curses. Remembering it's Halloween Eve, he tells the sheriff that he should have warned this family about the danger they are in. Milgreen asks Charlie to go home and not to disturb people with such nonsense. He also apologizes for the troublesome customer, implying that he is always drunk and doesn't make much sense. No one notices that she has snatched the baby's hat while he was in her lap. In the car, Nikki and her friends start mocking Charlie, imitating his prosaic way of delivering bad omens until he suddenly appears at the window and begins repeating the warnings in a much more aggressive manner. After the scare, the girls start laughing, comparing the incident to the kind of thing that happens in horror movies. Following Milgreen's instructions, Neil drives to the house where they will stay. Although it is beautiful from the outside, the place leaves much to be desired in comfort, as the thermostat is broken and the lights do not work. Neil says that all of this is easy to fix, and when Nikki warns that their cell phones have no signal, he replies that it's even better that way so they can enjoy the quiet. The girls start organizing their things in the room, and Nikki thanks her friend for coming, as it wouldn't have been easy to endure this trip, especially without a phone. They stop talking when they notice the arrival of a visitor, and Nikki lets out a groan of dismay upon seeing that it's Owen. Even Neil doesn't have much patience with his friend's megalomania, but he welcomes him gratefully nonetheless, as they are partners in the village modernization project. Nikki didn't know about this and starts protesting as soon as Owen leaves, reminding Neil of the promise he made to his deceased wife that he would not work with him again. The two argue, and Nikki becomes very hurt by his disrespect for her mother's memory. With great tact, Cammy talks to her and says that Nikki also made a promise when she told her mother that she would take care of Neil. Gradually, her mood improves, and the friends decide to turn back when they notice it's about to get dark. Later, Bea is adjusting Nathan's hat and crying over the son she lost to the curse of Hollowglen. Since that fateful night over a century ago, the same supernatural phenomenon occurs at the circular altar right in the center of the village. Always on the morning of October 31st, something that looks like a black cloak materializes in the air to fulfill the curse. Nearby, a family man named Derek is driving through the area with his wife and baby in the back seat. Suddenly, the cloak crashes against the windshield, almost causing an accident. Derek goes to check what happened and sees a dark rag under the front wheel. The thing retracts on its own as he approaches, and then Derek is pulled under the vehicle. His wife is attending to the baby when she feels the tremor. When she opens the door, she comes face to face with the horrifying goblin. Meanwhile, at the Willow Roadhouse, someone is watching Nikki with a knife in hand. She starts to wake up as the person approaches and then bursts into laughter, as it is just Cammy pulling a Halloween prank. During breakfast, the friction between Kate and Nikki becomes unpleasant, and the girls decide to go bike riding to buy things for the baby, since there's nothing better to do. On the way, they pass by Sheriff Milgreen, who is investigating what happened with Derek and his family. The other officer is Perry, the new deputy sheriff, and this is his first Halloween in the village. Seeing the baby seat, he mentions the date in a worried tone, but Milgreen immediately cuts off the subject. He says the residents suffer from these stupid rumors, and the last thing they need is a superstitious cop. Perry is surprised by the scolding and doesn't bring up the topic again. Arriving at the convenience store, the girls are outraged to see that it is closed on Halloween. Two elderly twins appear at the door but refuse to open, telling the girls to come back another day. Nikki tries to soften their hearts by saying they need to buy things for their baby brother. This terrifies the twins, and they say that Nikki needs to leave town right away. The girls are still confused by this bizarre interaction when two boys pull up in a car, and one of them recognizes Nikki. His name is Kyle, and Cammy gives her friend a nudge when she says she's heard a lot about him. He introduces his friend, Matt, who is staying in the neighboring town for a few days. The boys then start talking about the crazy rumors in the area and say that Jane, Matt's sister, knows the details. Meanwhile, Charlie is at the diner, spiking his coffee with a bit of whiskey. He tells Bea that he has found a way to end the curse of Hollowglen, but she becomes furious at the topic and kicks him out. When Nikki and Cammy arrive for a ride, Neil is furious at his daughter for being late because his meeting is about to start and she has to take care of her brother. Seeing that she found friends, he says he doesn't want those boys in the house during his absence. After the couple leaves for the meeting, the girls prepare to face an afternoon of pure boredom when they start hearing a series of strange noises. Startled, they tiptoe closer to the door, and a hooded figure appears as soon as they open it. With a fireplace poker, Cammy strikes the intruder mercilessly until she realizes it's Matt. Coming out of hiding, Kyle says that they went to get Jane and took the opportunity to buy diapers, trying to win Neil's favor. Cammy is very interested in Matt and even suggests leaving the baby alone so the two of them can go out with them, monitoring his sleep via the baby monitor. Nikki refuses the terrible idea but lets the visitors stay, even if it is just in the yard. Meanwhile, Kate and Neil meet Owen at the diner, and he immediately warns them that it is closed, just like all the other establishments in Hollowglen. Blaming this kind of weirdness for the lack of investment in the area, Owen explains to the couple about the Halloween curse. At the same time, Jane is telling her new friends about the legend of the goblin. Everyone is laughing at the beginning of the story, but when she reaches the part about babies, the atmosphere turns to intense dread. According to local belief, no baby is safe, and the danger lasts until sunrise on November 1st. Right at that moment, Nikki hears a noise on the baby monitor, and the screen starts to flicker. She rushes upstairs, relieved to see that her brother is fine. This is the perfect opportunity for Kyle to follow the girl to the bedroom. Seeing that the scare has passed, he takes the chance to kiss her. After catching the lovebirds, Cammy invites herself to go out with Matt, and her sister sulks, upset to be left out. In the diner, Neil is surprised by the arrival of Milgreen since he didn't know the sheriff was part of the city council. He explains that the town is small, and everyone has to hold multiple roles. Ignoring Owen's hints about professional conduct, Neil asks about the strange beliefs. Visibly uncomfortable, Milgreen asserts that the only curse that exists there is this kind of outdated superstition. Meanwhile, Cammy and Matt are looking for firewood to make a Halloween bonfire, but it soon becomes clear that the two will end up warming themselves in another way. A muffled roar interrupts the romance, and a repulsive odor hits them. Seeing a person covered with a black cloak, Matt thinks it's Kyle playing a prank and only realizes his mistake when he gets too close. Cammy witnesses the attack and runs away screaming. Nikki hears her from inside the house, but the friends assure her it's just a prank. Jane is so certain of that she even runs out of the house screaming as well, as if it were a scare competition. As Cammy gets lost in the woods trying to escape the goblin, the sheriff tells Neil that his proposals were rejected. Owen seems surprised by this, recalling that Milgreen himself suggested inviting Neil this time, precisely because the outlook was favorable. He explains that he genuinely liked the projects but couldn't convince anyone else because the people of Hollowglen are very averse to change. Jane is already far from the house, still convinced that it's all a game until a hand grips her leg. Seeing it's Cammy, she is shocked by her state and realizes she's not pretending. Then her brother also appears, already exhausted, and right behind him is the goblin himself. Running from the sinister predator, the girls end up separating. The goblin chooses Jane first, and Cammy once again is forced to witness a horrific scene. At the diner door, Owen and Neil begin to clash after the sheriff leaves. Kate thinks the sheriff is hiding something, but agrees with her husband when he considers the refusal a final decision. Owen thinks it's just a negotiation strategy and insists that Neil should double the offer, but he is already tired of his friend's antics. It's 2 in the afternoon when Nikki kicks Kyle out of the house, afraid of being caught by her father. She asks him to look for Cammy, as she's a bit worried about the delay. The friend is not far off, still running from the goblin until she trips over a kind of tombstone and falls right in the center of the circular altar. Overcome by visions of the bonfire, she begins to feel the flames on her skin. Her screams reach Nikki, and this time they are so horrific that even Kyle starts taking the situation seriously. Nikki runs to help her friend, but Kyle offers to go in her place while she goes back to take care of the baby. When she returns home, one of Nathan's toys is lying by the door. Nikki rushes to the room and panics upon seeing the empty crib. The house fills with police officers in less than half an hour. Kate is devastated and begins to suspect the teenagers, especially since 3 of them are also missing. Kyle is taken to the station, and Nikki begins talking about the goblin, which irritates the parents even more. After the police leave, someone knocks at the door. Charlie is peering from behind the bushes when Neil picks up his gift, a dossier on the disappearances of babies in Hollowglen. All occurred on October 31st, and Kate cries upon discovering that none of them were ever found. Seeing the news about the sheriff's son, Neil finds it very strange that Mill Green hasn't even mentioned it. Then he decides to look for Cammy and asks the 2 to lock everything up. Perry is escorting Kyle to the station when they pass by the goblin standing in the road, as if seeking a ride. Only Kyle sees what lies beneath the cloak before the monster dissolves into the air, and then the boy seizes the chance to flee. Perry theorizes that the kidnapper is trying to pass as the legendary goblin, and he decides to search for the strange hooded figure. Meanwhile, the foul odor reaches Willow Roadhouse, and Kate sees the goblin standing in the garden. Breaking the window, it invades the house and snarls at Nikki, who, frightened, escapes through the 2nd floor window and falls in front of the residence. As she recovers from the fall, she sees Kate lying in the middle of the living room and the goblin perched on the roof. To make matters worse, she also realizes that he has the power to disappear, appearing wherever he wants. But her hope is rekindled when she sees Kyle's Jeep arriving. She hops into the car as fast as she can, and even so, the apparition is already right in front of them. When Kyle tries to back up, they both realize Owen has just arrived and his car is blocking the way. Nikki starts shouting at him and begs him to move the vehicle, but Owen responds with his typical arrogance. When the goblin appears right behind him, and the young people start to run, he just laughs at the morbid joke. The 2 still try to warn him from afar, but it's too late when he finally turns around. Fleeing on foot through the forest, the young couple doesn't hesitate when Charlie appears offering a ride. He takes them to his picturesque hideaway and explains that the goblin doesn't attack adults for no reason, and that's why he hasn't taken Nathan. He only went after Nikki and Kate because he scented a baby he hadn't captured yet. Revealing his kinship with the Witch of Hollowglen, Charlie shares that she regretted the curse in her old age and built a spear to defeat her own monster. She ended up dying before she could do so, but left behind the weapon and her notes, which were passed down through generations until they reached Charlie. The poor guy lives from cup to cup because he never met anyone willing to help him with his fate. He can hardly believe it when Nikki accepts the challenge in exchange for his help in finding Nathan. As she takes a step outside the cabin, the characteristic odor already gives away the malevolent presence. Charlie wants to lure it with the smell of Nathan on Nikki's clothes, but Kyle doesn't like the idea of making her the bait. There's not much time to discuss, as the flying cloak has already landed. Faced with the goblin, Charlie tries to weaken it with shotgun shots and tells the couple to flee with his truck. Seeing that the tank is full, Kyle thinks they should head to the neighboring town, where the goblin can't reach them. But Nikki gets mad at the idea of abandoning her brother and then remembers something Charlie said about where to start the search. It's already night when the two arrive at the diner, and Nikki breaks down the door with a brick. While she calls her father and leaves a message, Kyle carefully explores the building until he comes face to face with the owner. Bea admits that Nathan is with her, but quickly explains that she only did this to protect him, as tourists never believe what goes on around there. She shows them a nursery, and the two immediately rush to the crib, falling into a trap. Nikki finds only a doll lying down, while Bea locks the intruders in the nursery. On the other side of the diner, Neil is arriving with Kate in bad shape. The sheriff says Bea was a nurse, but his efforts are in vain. Neil is devastated by the loss of another wife and starts to become suspicious of the other two. Taking the sheriff's gun, he demands that they tell him the truth, but Milgreen sees that Perry is also arriving and begins to stall for time. His plan works, and Neil finds himself forced to lower the gun. While Milgreen cuffs him, Neil tells Perry that he's making a mistake because those two are horrible people. Taking advantage of his colleague's crazy theory, the sheriff says Perry was right and accuses Neil of being the goblin enthusiast who kidnaps children. Right at that moment, everyone starts to hear a baby's cry coming from inside the house. Milgreen realizes that Perry has understood the truth, and the two draw their weapons at the same time. Still trapped in the nursery, Nikki and Kyle hear the gunshot. Unfortunately, it was Perry who got hurt, and Neil becomes the third prisoner. Trying to justify their crimes, Milgreen says any father would do the same. Bea also says that, unlike her, Neil at least has another daughter. In a lapse of mercy, Milgreen tosses the key to the handcuffs inside before locking the door tightly. As Neil frees himself, Nikki tells him everything about the goblin. Then the door suddenly opens, and Charlie appears. The young people are very happy he managed to escape, but what he has to say is very disturbing. Bea didn't kidnap Nathan for herself but to negotiate with the goblin, offering a new baby in exchange for her son. Then Charlie finally explains what happens to the stolen babies. The goblin keeps them all trapped in the spiritual realm to feed on their innocent souls. When the group arrives at the altar, Nathan is in Bea's arms. The sheriff has lit a bonfire, and the two are calling for the goblin, who doesn't take long to materialize in the mist. Meeting Bea's request, he lets her see the child again, now grown. However, when she tries to touch him, her hand passes through the boy. Seeing that it's all a trick, the sheriff calls his wife, wanting to leave. It's at that moment that Charlie and his friends begin the counterattack. Nikki takes her brother from Bea's hands while Neil shoots the monster. Weakening, the goblin doesn't notice Charlie approaching with the spear, but he can't pierce its skin, and Bea stops him from continuing. The cloak is destroyed, revealing the goblin in all its horror. The creature grabs the sickly couple and kills them. Neil and Nikki manage to escape and are almost at the car when Kyle asks them to stay. He has the spear and says it's not right to turn their backs on so many victims, knowing this is their last chance to end the curse. Neil ultimately agrees, and they plan an ambush in the living room, hoping the enemy will come after Nathan. Soon after, the monster crashes through the side window, entering from the opposite side of what they had planned. Neil takes the children out of the room, but he can't save Kyle, who stands facing the goblin as it furiously attacks the young man and kills him. Nikki quickly takes Nathan to the car, and while her father is being attacked, she positions the spear on the hood. Attracted by the baby's cries, the goblin abandons its assault on Neil. When it appears in front of the car, Nikki steps on the accelerator. A century after it was forged, the spear finally fulfills its duty, pinning the monster to a tree before triggering its complete destruction. All that remains of the fearsome goblin is a pile of bones. Days later, Nikki and her father bury everything at the circular altar and use the broken spear to mark the infamous grave.